On Saturday, Marshall Thundering Herd and the Louisiana Ragin Cajuns playing in the New Orleans Bowl, Caesars Superdome there in New Orleans, Louisiana. Not a long trip for Lafayette. Marshall Thundering Herd fans likely taking the trip there to the Big Easy. We're seeing 55.5 being the total. Louisiana -5 or -5 in the hook. They've won 12 straight here, Ralph. They're 0-4 against the spread. Their last 4 bowl games, however, and the change at the coaching with them taking the Florida Gators head coaching job there, Billy Napier, that is. What are you liking here, Marshall and Louisiana, Ralph?
Well, that's one of the situations. Can a bowl game be a letdown? Well, sure it can. Let's remember that we have Billy Napier, who's been here for 4 years. So he recruited all of these kids, starting with freshmen. What happened 4 years ago? They went to the Sun Belt Conference title. They went to App State. They lost. What happened 3 years ago? They went to the conference title. They went to App State and lost. I was absolutely on them last week because they finally got the conference game at home. It was a complete circle the wagons game. Third time you're playing this team in the conference championship. There was no conference championship the COVID year, but it would have been the same 2 teams. So you finally beat this team. Your head coach stayed to coach the game instead of moving on to Florida. That's how big of a deal that game was. So now you did it. You were Sun Belt champions. Your coach now leaves. Not only does he leave, he leaves with 5 other assistant coaches. So your coaching staff is very depleted from what you have. Now, you do have a new head coach who was the assistant DC who now is taking over. So there's some stability, and it's not just an interim head coach. You look at yards per game, and ULL has the edge, plus 120 yards per game versus plus 83, with the strength of schedules almost identical, 117th and 119th. So they both played strength of schedule. But Marshall is actually plus 1.34 yards per game, while ULL is 0.9. That's almost a 0.4 yards per game, close to a half a yard game difference. That's a mammoth Marshall edge. But can you trust Marshall? We know that ULL, since their opening loss at Texas, has won every game. Marshall lost 3 separate games as a favorite this year. And I do like ULL's defense. I see what they attacked, what they did at Liberty against an NFL-type quarterback, holding Liberty to 293 yards and getting 7 sacks. The sack edge, to me, huge advantage for ULL. I do want to point out for Marshall that their quarterback was injured in their final regular season game against Western Kentucky. He is good to go. The coach said he's practicing, no issues with him. So if there's any question with that, but ULL concerns me. It's not going to be strong enough to make a card because they are off that big win against App State. I did mention in the previous game, though, conference champions have done well. I have a light lean to ULL. Not going to make my card. The lightest of the 4 opinions I've given out today.
And Ralph, good breakdown. You did mention the DC taking the job. He's he's going to be the head coach next year too, right?
They have already announced him. So yes, he's not an interim. He's officially the head coach taking over for this game. And that, I said, adds a little more stability versus him versus having an interim for the game. Yep. Yeah.
Absolutely. The kids know if, coming back next year, hey, he's still the head guy in charge. So kind of need to impress him. Hey, winning 12 straight here. Adam, interested in your opinion. Louisiana Lafayette, kind of a tricky handicap change at the head coach. But Marshall, one thing I've actually noticed with Marshall, I was looking in my notes here, their defensive front and linebackers are pretty good. I think that they'll be able to hold their own against that Louisiana kind of offensive line there. And also the Ragin Cajuns, for whatever reason, it seems like against good teams, they play up, and against, not so good teams, they kind of play to their competition. Something to kind of keep in mind here. What do you like in the Big Easy Saturday night?
Yeah. So, great points by both of you. And again, Drew, that's absolutely, I think, the case with Marshall. And what I've noticed with Marshall is, with Lafayette, what I've noticed with Lafayette is you can beat them if you can kind of hit the big play. And I think Marshall does that particularly well, especially if you can hit the big play in the Lafayette secondary. That's where you can score on this team. I think this comes down to, how much do you trust Marshall? And, the one thing that I keep seeing cited is the turnover issues, but that was pretty much early in the season for Marshall. They really haven't turned the ball over down the stretch like they did early on. So I think they've kind of improved upon that. And Ralph sort of nailed it. This absolutely feels like it could be a letdown game for Lafayette, because the magnitude of that game championship weekend was so big for them, and to get that win, it reminds me a little bit of championship weekend when Oklahoma State beat Oklahoma finally, and then came out, and it was almost like their championship game was kind of a little bit of a letdown. That's kind of how I feel with Lafayette here as a favorite in this spot. So Marshall, if they're going to turn the ball over like crazy, they're going to lose. So that's really, I think, the key for Marshall here. Given the extra time to prepare for this game, I'd like to think that they have a good enough game plan where they can put a couple of big plays together and hit on those big plays and not turn it over, to the point where it's going to lose them the game. Drew, you said it. They're vulnerable defensively, but the one area where they can sort of like make some hay on defense is their pass rush. And the one thing with Lafayette, they're laying a number. And what I've noticed with Lafayette is, let's say they get a lead. Let's say they've got a field goal lead late in the game. They go pretty conservative with the play call. And it's almost like they trust their defense so much and their ability to sort of, make good decisions, for Levi Lewis to make good decisions and run the ball and move the chains, that, this gets to be a 3-4 point game with 8 minutes left. Lafayette gets the ball. Like you might see them just go, first down, and be content with just like running the clock. Or if the drive stalls out, they'll punt. So I'd be like worried less about a team like, let's say Lafayette has that lead, them just sort of like breaking one off and covering the number that way, or basically trying to put more points on the board, because I think they trust their defense and their ability to move the chains and sort of control the clock. So Marshall, but the way I lean here is the dog. I think Marshall has a chance here. I think if they have the right game plan and they can hit on some big plays, they can win. So I haven't got to the window with it yet, but I'm definitely looking at taking the points.
Drew, I want to bring up what one point Adam made about the turnovers. Just look at the quarterback ratios. Grant Wells, 16-12 ratio. Levi Lewis, 19-4 ratio.
Yeah, Levi Lewis has been a beast, Ralph. Hey, any opinion on him? Maybe, I don't know if he'd play quarterback in the NFL, but we just saw Tyler Huntley for Utah make an appearance in the NFL. You think Levi Lewis has any shot at playing in the league?
I'm horrible at those type of this.
Okay.
I understand what a quarterback needs and making that out pass. If you could throw an out pass, 25 yards on a line, you're going to get a shot in the NFL. That's not Lewis, but evaluating college football talent is nothing I ever got into. So I will not say something stupid by just not saying anything at all.
Hey, that works, man. It was just one of those things it kind of hit my head, because watching Tyler Huntley there for the Ravens, it kind of surprised me that he made the roster. But I can remember thinking that at Utah, like he wasn't hitting those 25-yard out routes like you're talking about, but nonetheless he's made a roster spot there for the Ravens. So guys,